Hello everyone. As many of us already know, media and mass media in general has changed significantly over the last 5 decades due to the resolution of technologies. So today, we'll be discussing how media has evolved over the last 50 years. Media nowadays is so important to our daily lives. We use media and are involved in media. We use media outlets for multiple purposes: for entertainment, for news, for interpersonal communication, etc. So, what is media? Media comes in different formats, like print media, like newspapers or magazines, broadcasting, movies or music, and the internet. Even though magazines and print newspapers have changed a lot due to technologies and the invention of internet make broadcasting and entertainment evolves considerably over the last 50 years. They changed the way we consume entertainment, how broadcasts are produced, and how they are presented. Now let's look at how music was consumed in the past. Back to the 1970s, record players were something that every family would have in their homes. Listening to a record player was the only way people can do to access music without having to go out and see musicians live. Record players back then would come with a radio in a big box that looks like a big tape. Some of the most well-known artists back then were Carly Simon, Sonny and Cher, and the Beatles. Records were so popular that you can easily see a record store in your neighborhood, or you can easily get records from any bookstore or sometimes from department stores, even though they were quite expensive back then. Technology advances later led to the born of compact discs, a digital optical disc data storage format, and most recently, audio and music streaming services that replaced records. Nowadays, music can be streamed everywhere, anytime, through a broad range of devices. But there was actually another way you could listen to music back then, which is through the radio. KJR was the most popular music radio station back in the 1970s. Radio was listened to a lot to in cars since cars started to have radio inside in early 1970s. Radio was a big part of people's daily lives since other than listening to shows and music, they also got news from radio. And radio, along with television, were the two main outlets for commercials back in the day. Radio nowadays is no more popular, even though it is much more advanced than in the past. People would use radio as a source for news if they have online news outlets available to use. Some are still using radio for entertainment purposes like listening to music, and iHeartRadio, a free broadcast and radio streaming platform, has been the most popular radio platform among the young over the last couple of years. In addition to that, radio nowadays can be streamed through different devices like smartphones, tablets, laptops, etc. So, what about television? Television began in the 1940s, but the 1960s were its golden age. TVs back then were big square boxes. Most of Americans just had black and white TVs since color TVs were hard to find and was very expensive. Televisions back then would only have up to 8 channels, and what was aired was mostly just news and comedy shows. Indeed, television in the past was the main source for people to get news. More than 350 million people around the world were sitting by the TV to watch the Eagle spacecraft touch down on the moon's surface for the first time in the human history in 1969. And watching TV was a very exciting experience to people of all ages back then. Many people would make a point to spend their family time on watching a TV shows together. TVs now today are high technology. They are flat and can be controlled remotely. Different from television back in the 1960s, television now has much more of a variety of shows, but many of those shows are not family friendly. In other words, they're not as much censorship as in the past. TV is no more exciting experience to many people, and some families would have TV on all day as a background sound. And young people nowadays don't even feel like they need to get a TV for their homes. Technologies have made our lives more convenient every day. Media now today look a lot different than it did before. The advance of technologies changed the way media is viewed and consumed dramatically. Different from 50 years ago, we now have multiple ways to get information and communicate with others. And a lot of them are done through a little device that all of us might now have on our hands, or in our pockets, or right next to, which is the smartphones.